The sound of the explosion tore through the quiet morning like thunder from hell. It was 8:47 a.m. when neighbors rushed out of their homes, their hearts pounding, trying to understand what had just happened. Smoke rose from the parking lot of a downtown office building in Salt Lake City, Utah. A car had just exploded, flames licking the air, glass shattered everywhere, and a man thrown several feet away, his clothes burned, face covered in blood and confusion. That man was Ethan Cole, a 33-year-old rare document collector. People didn't know it yet, but the explosion wasn't an accident. It was a desperate move by a man whose world was collapsing, a man who had built his fortune on lies, and now, those lies were burning him alive. Before we go deeper into this twisted story of deception, greed, and murder, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss other powerful stories like this one, stories that reveal how far people will go when their secrets start to surface. Just a few years earlier, Ethan wasn't known for chaos or violence. He was seen as one of the most brilliant young collectors in the historical world, charming, smart, confident. He had the rare ability to make people believe anything he said, and that gift was exactly what destroyed him. Ethan started out like any ambitious young man, broke, hungry for recognition, and obsessed with history. But somewhere along the line, his desire to own history turned into the desire to fake it. It all began when he discovered he could make a fortune by forging old documents. Not just any documents, national treasures. He'd sit for hours in his apartment, carefully studying handwriting styles from the 1800s, experimenting with different inks, even burning paper edges to make them look aged. One night, he created his first masterpiece, a supposed 1830 letter from a famous early American preacher. He smudged the ink slightly, folded the paper a dozen times, then tucked it inside an old Bible he bought from a thrift store. The next day, he took it to a local historian and said he'd found it while cleaning out his grandfather's attic. The historian's eyes widened. Within a week, Ethan sold the letter for $15,000. And that single deal lit a fire inside him, a dangerous kind of fire. Ethan dropped out of college not long after. He called himself a rare document dealer, which was technically true, only his documents weren't rare because of history. They were rare because no one else had ever made them before. He built an entire business out of lies. Fake letters from George Washington, a forged poem supposedly written by Emily Dickinson, even a counterfeit map, drawn by an early explorer. He sold to museums, private collectors, even religious institutions that never questioned his credibility. The scary part, he was good, too good. Experts studied his work and called it authentic. His fame grew, so did his greed. By the time he turned 30, Ethan was living in a luxury home, driving expensive cars, and collecting real artifacts to keep up appearances. But beneath all that success, he was drowning in debt. He owed investors hundreds of thousands of dollars, people who had trusted him with their money, believing he was hunting for lost historical treasures. Only there were no treasures. There was just Ethan, and his printer, ink, and lies. When investors started demanding their money back, Ethan panicked. So, he did what every desperate conman does, he created more lies to cover the old ones. He began pitching bigger scams. He told one investor he'd found a rare document from the nation's first printing press. Another, he promised an original Revolutionary-era speech. And they believed him, because Ethan didn't just sell paper, he sold hope. But by 1985, his fake empire was collapsing. His debt had reached over $1 million, and his investors were closing in. Then came the plan, the one that would end everything. Ethan claimed he'd uncovered a lost document that could rewrite American history, something so valuable it would make him rich enough to clear all his debts overnight. He offered it to the National Archives for $1.5 million. They agreed, but only after proper testing. Weeks passed, tests were delayed, and Ethan knew the truth. Once those experts ran the full analysis, they'd discover the document was fake. That's when paranoia set in. He needed a distraction, something big enough to shift all attention away from him. And so, he built bombs. Homemade, silent killers disguised in packages. One for a rival collector, another for someone who knew too much. He thought it would buy him time, or at least confuse investigators long enough for him to disappear. But that morning, as the fire from his own car burned his skin, Ethan realized the trap he set for others had finally caught him. He survived that explosion, barely. But his secrets didn't. When the police began to dig, what they found would expose one of the most shocking frauds in American history. And that was only the beginning. If you're still here, you've only seen the surface of Ethan's deception. Subscribe now so you don't miss the next part of this unbelievable story, because what comes next is darker than anyone imagined. The hospital room smelled like burnt metal and medicine. Ethan Cole lay motionless, his face bandaged, his arm in a cast, and his leg wrapped tightly after being blown through the door of his own car. He was lucky to be alive, but luck wasn't really on his side anymore. As detectives gathered outside his room, they already had one question on their minds. Why did a bomb end up in Ethan's car? At first, Ethan played the part of the victim perfectly. He told police he had no idea what happened. He said he opened his car door, and a package just fell out. When he bent down to pick it up, boom, the explosion happened. It sounded convincing, until investigators took a closer look. The car's front seat was completely destroyed, burned from the inside out. That meant the bomb wasn't under the car or outside it, it was inside the vehicle. And there was only one person who could have put it there, Ethan himself. Detectives found pieces of metal wiring, screws, and battery fragments in the debris, all materials used for homemade explosives. Then they checked Ethan's office. What they discovered there would blow the case wide open. In one of his storage rooms, investigators found tools for document restoration, but not just that. They found chemicals that could be used for aging paper and ink. On one desk sat a half-finished, antique letter, and beside it were scribbled signatures of famous historical figures, all in Ethan's handwriting. It was clear, this man wasn't just a victim. He was a forger, and possibly a killer. Meanwhile, news about the bombings was spreading fast. The first victim had been identified, Robert Hale, another document dealer who had been doing business with Ethan for years. He died instantly when the package left at his office exploded. The second victim was Linda Ward, the wife of a business associate linked to Ethan's fake deals. She died after picking up a package left in her driveway. 2 people dead, 1 man nearly killed in his own explosion, and all 3 bombings were connected to the same rare document circle. The police knew it couldn't be a coincidence. They started tracing Ethan's financial activities, and what they found was staggering. Ethan wasn't just selling fake documents for quick cash. He was running a full-blown Ponzi scheme. He'd convinced investors to fund his historical discoveries. He promised them priceless documents that would soon be worth millions. But every document he claimed to find was forged in his basement. When one investor demanded payment, Ethan would use money from a new investor to pay the old one, just to keep the illusion alive. It worked for a while. Until it didn't. By the time of the explosions, Ethan owed over $1 million to various investors, collectors, and institutions, including a large religious organization that had purchased dozens of his fake items. When investigators confronted one of his former clients, the man sighed and said, "Ethan always seemed so sincere. He even cried when he showed me that letter. I thought he was one of us." That was Ethan's real talent. Not forgery, not chemistry, but deception. He could make anyone believe anything. But as detectives started piecing things together, the story grew darker. In the days before the explosions, Ethan had been under enormous pressure. Several investors were demanding refunds. One threatened to sue him, and the religious group he'd been selling to wanted proof of authenticity for a massive new collection he promised to deliver. He was running out of time. Investigators believe that's when he decided to create chaos. By setting off bombs, he could destroy evidence, eliminate anyone who might expose him, and make it look like someone was targeting the entire collector community. But he didn't count on surviving his own blast. A few weeks later, once Ethan recovered enough to speak, detectives questioned him again. He stuck to his story. He said someone was after him, that the same person who killed Robert and Linda had tried to kill him too. But the evidence didn't lie. When the bomb squad matched the wiring pattern from Ethan's car to the first 2 explosions, it was identical. Same design, same materials, same maker. Ethan Cole had built all 3 bombs. The news shook the entire collector community. People who had admired him, historians, curators, religious leaders, now realized they had been deceived for years. Everything he'd touched was fake. Every promise he made was a lie. And now, 2 innocent people were dead because of it. As the truth unraveled, investigators searched deeper into his archives. What they found next would make the entire country question what was real, and what was forged. The web around Ethan Cole was tightening, and every secret he'd ever buried was about to surface. But the most shocking discovery wasn't the bombs, it was what they found hidden inside his office safe. The search of Ethan Cole's office turned into one of the most chaotic investigations the city had ever seen. Officers in gloves and masks carefully stepped around piles of old books, sealed boxes, and burned fragments of paper. The blast had destroyed much of his car, but what it didn't destroy were the lies stacked inside his workspace. A dull light flickered from a corner lamp as Detective Morgan flipped through a folder labeled Private Acquisitions. Inside were dozens of receipts, handwritten notes, sale agreements, and letters. All of them supposedly authentic documents from historical figures. But one by one, experts confirmed every single piece was a forgery. The scale of Ethan's operation was massive. He had forged letters, maps, and manuscripts from every century imaginable. Some were convincing enough to fool the most experienced collectors. Others were so bold they could have rewritten parts of American history if accepted as real. On one shelf, investigators found jars filled with old-looking ink, stacks of aged paper, and chemicals used to stain and soften material. He had everything, a full workshop of deceptive. As investigators dug deeper, they discovered a heavy metal safe hidden behind a false wall panel. It took nearly an hour to crack open, and when they did, the room fell silent. Inside were hundreds of documents, neatly sealed in plastic. Some bore the signatures of presidents, others of poets, inventors, and preachers. And then there was a small brown envelope labeled, Legacy Collection. Detective Morgan carefully opened it. Inside were letters that appeared to challenge the foundation of a well-known religious movement. One of the documents claimed that its founder had secretly appointed someone else as his successor, a revelation that, if true, would have changed the group's entire history. It was all fake, but to the people who believed in that history, it would have been devastating. The discovery made everything clear. Ethan wasn't just forging for profit anymore. He was playing God with history, rewriting it to suit his greed. Word of the investigation spread like wildfire. Reporters crowded outside police headquarters, demanding answers. Collectors, museums, and religious leaders called in daily, terrified that the items they'd bought from Ethan were worthless. One newspaper headline read, "Brilliant historian or master liar. The truth about Ethan Cole." Ethan, still recovering in the hospital, refused to talk to the press. He claimed he'd been framed by jealous rivals. But the evidence said otherwise. When police searched his home, they found notebooks filled with practice signatures, hundreds of them. Each page showed the same name written dozens of times until it looked perfect. He had copied handwriting from books, photographs, and museum archives. Every detail, the slant of the letters, the ink pressure, even the spacing, had been studied and mimicked. He wasn't improvising, he was rehearsing. Investigators traced his financial history and learned that, for years, Ethan had used fake names and false companies to move money between accounts. Every sale he made had been followed by a quiet deposit in an offshore bank. But what shocked them most wasn't just how much money he made, it was who he fooled. Some of his forgeries had been sold to national museums. Others were bought by private collectors worth millions. Even one prestigious university had proudly displayed one of his fake manuscripts in its library for months. The truth hit like a second explosion. A man with no real credentials had tricked the world's top historians, and no one had questioned him. Detective Morgan finally visited Ethan in the hospital after weeks of gathering evidence. When she entered his room, he looked pale, weak, and strangely calm. She placed a thick file on his bedside table. "These are your signatures," she said. "Every single one." Ethan gave a faint smile. "I was good at what I did," he whispered. "You were," Morgan replied. "Until you started killing people." He didn't respond. Instead, he turned his head toward the window, staring at the world outside, the same world he had manipulated with ink and paper. As months passed, the investigation expanded into one of the largest fraud cases in American history. Experts worked tirelessly to identify every fake document Ethan had ever sold. In total, over 60 forged items were recovered, worth millions of dollars combined. But there was something else, something more chilling. Among his files, detectives found blueprints, detailed sketches of bombs, measurements, trigger mechanisms, materials lists, everything needed to build the exact kind of explosives that had killed Robert Hale and Linda Ward. That sealed it. Ethan Cole wasn't just a con artist. He was a murderer. And yet, even as the evidence mounted, Ethan remained strangely unshaken. He told his lawyer that he never intended to kill anyone. That the bombs were a distraction that got out of control. But the truth was written all over his designs, his notes, and his actions. He had built the bombs carefully. He had chosen his targets deliberately. And he had done it all to protect the only thing that mattered to him, his lies. The prosecutors were ready. The city wanted justice, and the man who forged history was about to face the truth he could no longer rewrite. Ethan sat in his dimly lit apartment, the walls closing in on him as the weight of the investigation grew heavier. The once vibrant hum of the city outside now sounded like a distant echo, mocking his descent into chaos. The news had twisted everything. Headlines screamed that he was the prime suspect behind the laboratory explosion. Everywhere he went, eyes followed him. His neighbors whispered, colleagues avoided him, and even his family had gone silent. The only person who still believed him was Claire, though even she sounded uncertain the last time they spoke. Desperate for answers, Ethan decided to visit the ruins of the lab one last time, not as a scientist, but as a man determined to clear his name. He snuck past the police barriers late at night, armed only with a flashlight and his fading courage. The charred remains of the building stood like a graveyard of secrets. The smell of burnt chemicals lingered in the air, thick and nauseating. Ethan walked slowly, his heart pounding as he reached what used to be his office. Half buried under a collapsed shelf, he spotted something, a half-melted metallic case. He yanked it out, coughing as dust filled his lungs. Inside was a flash drive, still intact. His hands trembled as he wiped it clean. This could be it, he whispered. Proof they set me up. He hurried home and plugged the drive into his laptop. Folders appeared, encrypted files labeled with strange codes and dates. After hours of decoding, a video file opened. Ethan leaned forward, eyes wide, as a grainy security feed showed men in hazmat suits sneaking into the lab 2 nights before the explosion. One of them turned toward the camera. Ethan froze. It was someone he knew, his former mentor, Drive. Marcus Hale, the same man who had convinced him to take the project in the first place. The footage showed Marcus planting something near the reactor. Ethan felt sick. This was no accident, it was a setup, and Marcus was behind it. But before Ethan could copy the file to another drive, his screen flickered. A remote connection appeared. Someone else was in his system. He tried to disconnect, but the files started deleting themselves one by one. Within seconds, the drive went blank. Ethan slammed his laptop shut and cursed under his breath. Whoever Marcus worked for was watching him. Moments later, his phone buzzed. A message popped up from an unknown number. Stop digging, Ethan, you're already dead. Ethan's hands shook as he read the words. He looked out the window and noticed a black car parked across the street, engine running, lights off. Panic surged through him. He grabbed his backpack, stuffed the ruined flash drive inside, and slipped out the back door. The night swallowed him as he disappeared into the alleyways, his heart racing faster than his footsteps. He had lost everything, his reputation, his job, his friends, but he had gained one thing, the truth. And now, the people who destroyed his life would stop at nothing to silence him. He wasn't running anymore. He was going to expose them, or die trying. Rain poured heavily that night, drenching the city in silver streaks. Ethan's hoodie clung to his back as he darted through narrow streets, avoiding the glare of passing headlights. The black car followed at a slow, steady pace, like a predator watching its prey exhaust itself before striking. He turned into an abandoned underpass, breathing hard, his shoes splashing through puddles. Every sound felt amplified, the hum of distant traffic, the whisper of rain against concrete, and the faint echo of his own fear. He needed help, but who could he trust now? The police believed he was the criminal. His mentor had betrayed him. The only person who might still listen was Claire. He found an old public phone at the corner of a rundown gas station. It barely worked, but after a few failed tries, the line connected. Claire, he whispered, it's me, Ethan, where are you? The police came to my apartment. They're saying you're dangerous. They're lying. He cut her off, voice cracking. Marcus set me up. I have proof, or I had proof. They wiped everything. Silence filled the line. Then Claire said quietly, you can't come here. They're watching me too. Ethan's chest tightened. Then tell me what to do. I can't keep running forever. There's someone who can help you, she said. A journalist named Riley Ward. He's been investigating corruption in the company Marcus worked for. I'll send his address, but please, be careful. They've already killed 2 people who tried to talk. Before he could respond, the line went dead. Ethan's heart sank. He glanced around. The black car had stopped a few meters away. Two men in dark coats stepped out. Without thinking, Ethan bolted. Bullets tore through the air, sparking off metal signs and glass. He jumped a fence, scraping his arm, and kept running until his legs burned. His lungs screamed for air, but he didn't stop. By the time he reached an old warehouse district, the city lights had faded behind him. He hid inside a broken storage unit, clutching his backpack like it contained his last hope. Inside, he found a single flickering bulb and an old metal desk. He took out the flash drive, still useless, still empty. But then he noticed something odd, a hidden compartment at the bottom. It clicked open, revealing a small memory chip sealed in plastic. His pulse quickened. Maybe Marcus hadn't erased everything. Maybe there was still a chance. He took out his laptop, inserted the chip, and watched as new files appeared: blueprints, government contracts, and confidential reports with one name that kept repeating: Project Helios. Ethan scrolled through, his face pale. Project Helios wasn't about renewable energy. It was a covert program, testing chemical compounds for biological warfare, disguised as a green initiative. In the explosion, it wasn't a mistake, it was a cover-up to destroy the evidence and eliminate everyone involved. A loud bang echoed outside the warehouse. Ethan froze. Someone had found him. He turned off the light and backed away slowly, clutching the drive. Shadows moved at the entrance, 2, maybe 3 figures. Then, a voice called out, "Ethan, we don't want to hurt you. Give us the chip, and this ends peacefully." He didn't believe them. His mind raced. He could run, fight, or hand over the only proof that could clear his name. But he wasn't the same man who had run before. Not anymore. He took a deep breath, whispered, "Not this time," and grabbed a rusted metal pipe from the floor. The door burst open, and chaos began. The night turned into a blur of shouts, gunfire, and shattered glass. Ethan swung the pipe wildly, striking one of the masked men as another lunged toward him. The air smelled of metal and fear. He dodged a blow, kicked a crate toward the exit, and bolted into the storm. He didn't stop running until the city lights flickered again on the horizon. His clothes were soaked, his hands bleeding, but he still clutched the memory chip, his only proof, his only hope. By morning, he reached the address Claire had given him. It was a small apartment on the edge of town, hidden above a dusty old bookstore. He knocked twice. A man with tired eyes and unshaven stubble opened the door. "Riley Ward," Ethan gasped. "That depends on who's asking," the man said, scanning him suspiciously. "I'm Ethan Cross. I was framed for the Helios explosion. I have something you need to see." Riley's expression shifted. He stepped aside and motioned him in. The apartment was cluttered with papers, photos pinned to walls, red strings connecting names and places, evidence of years of digging. Ethan placed the chip on the table. "This has everything. Proof of what they did." Riley nodded, inserted it into his laptop, and waited as files loaded. The screen filled with classified documents, contracts between powerful companies, and emails from government officials. "This," Riley whispered, "this is huge. They'll do anything to keep this quiet." Ethan leaned forward. "Then expose it. Let the world know the truth." Before Riley could respond, his phone buzzed. He checked the message and froze. "What is it?" Ethan asked. Riley's eyes darted up. "We've been found." The door slammed open. Men in tactical gear flooded the room. Ethan's instincts kicked in. He grabbed the chip, dove behind the couch, and knocked over the laptop. Riley shouted, "Go, get out." Ethan crashed through the back window, landing hard in an alley. He limped away, clutching the chip to his chest. Behind him, he heard the muffled sound of a gunshot. He didn't look back. He couldn't. Hours later, he found refuge in a train station, blending in with the early commuters. He sank onto a bench, his mind spiraling. He had lost Riley. He had lost almost everyone. But the chip was still safe. Or so he thought. A familiar voice echoed behind him. "You're a hard man to find, Ethan." He turned, and froze. It was Claire. She looked different, colder, sharper. Her soft eyes were now like glass. "Claire, how did you find me?" She smiled faintly. "Because I never lost you." Ethan felt the ground tilt beneath him. "What do you mean?" She sighed. "I'm sorry, Ethan. You were never supposed to see the files. Marcus was sloppy, and now everything's out of control. Hand me the chip, and maybe they'll let you live." His stomach dropped. You were with them. "I tried to protect you," she said quietly. "But you made it impossible." Anger and disbelief flashed across his face. You led me to Riley. You knew they'd kill him. Tears welled in her eyes, but her hand didn't tremble as she pointed a gun at him. Please, Ethan, just give me the chip. Don't make me do this. He stepped back slowly. After everything they've taken from me, you expect me to just hand it over? Her voice broke. If you don't, they'll kill us both. For a moment, silence hung between them, rain tapping softly against the station roof. Then Ethan whispered, they can try. He turned and ran as Claire shouted his name. A shot rang out, grazing his shoulder, but he didn't stop. He darted through the crowd, disappearing onto a moving train just as the doors closed. Blood soaked his sleeve, but he clutched the chip tightly. He had lost his mentor, his freedom, and now the only person he thought he could trust. But he still had the truth. And as long as he was alive, the truth wasn't buried yet. The train rattled through the night, cutting across the silent countryside. Ethan pressed his wounded shoulder, trying to stay conscious. His thoughts spun in chaos: Claire's betrayal, Marcus's murder, Riley's death. Everyone who tried to help him ended up dead. But he couldn't stop now. The chip in his pocket held the truth, and he was determined to expose it, no matter what it cost. He found a quiet corner in the nearly empty train car, connected the chip to his old tablet, and began digging through the files. Most of it was encrypted, but one folder was open: Project Helios, Phase 4. Inside, he found a list of names: politicians, military officers, business executives, and at the top, Director Nathan Crow, head of the National Security Division. Ethan's breath caught. Crow was one of the most powerful men in the country, and he had personally signed off on the operation. Ethan opened one of the attached videos. It was grainy security footage. He watched as men in suits exchanged envelopes, discussing contracts and payoffs. Then came the voice, calm, confident, and chillingly familiar. Crow. He was ordering the destruction of evidence, the elimination of witnesses, and the framing of Ethan Cross. Ethan felt his pulse hammering. So it was you all along, he whispered. He played another file, this one titled, Testimony 9A. It showed Marcus, bound to a chair, bruised and bloody. A voice behind the camera, Crow's again, asked, where is the prototype? Marcus spat blood, glaring at the camera. You can kill me, but you'll never get it. Crow laughed softly. I already have what I need. The screen went black. Ethan's stomach churned. They hadn't just killed Marcus, they had made sure no one could trace the technology back to them. And now, they were coming for him next. The next morning, the train stopped in an old industrial city. Ethan slipped off quietly, hood pulled low. He needed help, and there was only one person left he could trust: drive. Alara Voss, a cyber forensics expert who once worked with Marcus. If anyone could verify the chip's authenticity, it was her. He found her in a small lab hidden beneath an auto repair shop. Her silver hair was tied back, her eyes sharp and analytical. Alara, he said quietly, stepping into the light. She looked up, startled, then wary. Ethan Cross, you're supposed to be dead. Not yet, he replied. But I will be if we don't act fast. He handed her the chip. I need you to decrypt this and help me prove what they did. She hesitated. Do you have any idea who you're dealing with? Crow isn't just powerful, he owns the system. The moment we plug that in, they'll know. I don't care, Ethan said. They destroyed everything I had. I'm not running anymore. Alara studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Fine, but once we start, there's no turning back. She inserted the chip into her workstation. The screens flickered, lines of code filling the monitors. Ethan watched as data poured out, documents, communications, hidden video archives. Alara frowned. They encrypted it with a military-grade key. But whoever made this, left a backdoor. Marcus, Ethan said softly. He must have known this day would come. After hours of work, the final file unlocked. A digital blueprint appeared, not of a weapon, but of a neural surveillance system capable of reading and recording human thoughts in real time. Project Helios wasn't about energy, as they claimed. It was about control. Alara leaned back, stunned. They were going to use this to manipulate leaders, influence decisions, rewrite reality itself. Ethan clenched his fists. They were never trying to save the world. They were trying to own it. Before Alara could respond, a sharp beep filled the room. Her monitors glitched, static, then a red warning message. Trace detected. Unauthorized access. Location compromised. Alara's eyes widened. They've found us. A black SUV screeched to a halt outside. Heavy footsteps echoed from above. Ethan grabbed the chip and stuffed it into his jacket. "Go through the back," Alara shouted, pulling open a maintenance hatch. "I'll stall them." "Not without you," Ethan said. She shook her head. "I'm already on their list, Ethan. You're the only one who can finish this. Now go." He hesitated for a split second, then ran. As he crawled through the narrow tunnel, gunfire erupted behind him. When he emerged into the cold night air, the auto shop was engulfed in flames. Another person gone because of him. He looked down at the chip, trembling with rage. "This ends tonight." Ethan pulled his phone from his pocket and dialed a number he hadn't used in years, a journalist contact named Samantha Cade. When she answered, he said, "I've got something that'll bring down the whole system." The night sky was bruised purple over the city skyline as Ethan moved through the back alleys, his hoodie pulled low and his heart pounding. Every step echoed with purpose. He had lost friends, mentors, and even the woman he thought loved him, all for one reason, the truth. Now, he was ready to expose it all. He reached a rundown diner on the outskirts of town and slipped into a corner booth. Minutes later, a woman walked in, sharp eyes, short brown hair, camera bag slung across her shoulder. Samantha Cade, investigative journalist, and one of the few people Ethan knew wouldn't sell him out. She sat across from him, studying him closely. "You look like hell." "Feels worse," Ethan muttered, sliding the chip across the table. "That's everything. Project Helios, the cover-ups, the deaths." Samantha frowned. "If this is what you say it is, people will die to keep it buried." "They already have," Ethan said. His voice was steady, but his eyes burned with quiet fury. "Riley, Marcus, Alara, they gave their lives for this." Samantha plugged the chip into her encrypted laptop. Her screen glowed softly in the dim light as files began to open. Her eyes widened as she scrolled through the documents. "My God, this is massive. Neural surveillance, behavioral control. They've been experimenting on civilians for years." Ethan leaned forward. "It's Crow. He's behind all of it. He framed me to hide what they were doing." Samantha's fingers trembled as she typed. "Once we go public with this, there's no going back. You'll have a target on your back for the rest of your life." Ethan gave a half smile. "They've been trying to kill me for months. It's time they start running instead." They worked in silence for hours. Samantha uploaded the files to secure servers, sending copies to multiple trusted journalists around the world. Each transmission was encrypted and time-locked, set to release automatically if anything happened to them. By dawn, the truth was no longer in one man's hands, it was everywhere. But Crow wasn't one to be defeated easily. As the first reports hit the airwaves, the government's response was swift. Broadcasts were cut, websites shut down, and agents swarmed the city in search of Ethan. He and Samantha barely escaped the diner before it was raided. Sirens wailed in the distance as they raced through narrow streets, the city alive with chaos. They found temporary shelter in an abandoned subway tunnel. Ethan leaned against the cold wall, exhausted but alive. "Is it out there?" he asked. Samantha checked her phone. A smile tugged at her lips. "Yes, it's everywhere. People are already sharing it. Crow can't stop it now." Ethan exhaled, relief mixing with disbelief. For the first time in months, he felt like he could breathe. But that peace didn't last long. The tunnel filled with footsteps, heavy, coordinated, military. Samantha's smile faded. "They found us." Ethan drew in a breath, pulling her behind an overturned bench. Flashlights swept across the dark tunnel. Crow's voice echoed, smooth and venomous. "You've caused quite a storm, Cross. But it ends here." Ethan stepped into the open, blood-streaked but unbroken. "You can kill me, Crow, but it's too late. The world knows." Crow smirked. "The world believes what it's told. And right now, they're being told you're a terrorist." Samantha quietly pressed a button on her phone, activating a live stream. Cameras hidden in her jacket blinked red. Ethan noticed and gave a subtle nod. He faced Crow again. "You built a system to control the truth. But you forgot one thing. People still think for themselves." Crow raised his gun. "Did they?" The shot echoed through the tunnel. Ethan fell to his knees, clutching his side. Samantha screamed, diving toward him, but he motioned for her to stay back. With his last ounce of strength, Ethan looked up at Crow and whispered, "You've already lost." Moments later, a flood of sirens and flashing lights filled the tunnel. Federal investigators and journalists poured in. The live stream had drawn them straight to the scene. Crow's face, gun in hand, was caught on camera. The truth wasn't just exposed, it was undeniable. As medics rushed Ethan onto a stretcher, he managed a weak smile toward Samantha. "Make sure they finish what we started." She gripped his hand. "I will." The next day, every major news outlet in the world carried the story. Project Helios exposed. Director Nathan Crow was arrested. Protests erupted. The people reclaimed their voice. Ethan Cross's name, once tied to deceit and destruction, became a symbol of courage, a man who risked everything to reveal the truth. The story of Ethan Cross reminds us that sometimes the biggest battles are fought in silence, behind closed doors, by people the world barely notices, until they change it. If you found this story powerful, stay with us for more gripping stories of courage, betrayal, and redemption. Don't forget to subscribe, because the next story might just change how you see the world.